Abigail stars Alicia Weir, Melissa Barrera, Dan Stevens, and is directed by Matt Bettinelli-Olpin. And it's about a group of misfits who kidnap a little girl and have to hold her captive in a spooky old mansion for 24 hours. That is in order to extort her rich father out of $50 million. But they get more than they bargained for when they discover that they walked into a trap and the little girl they kidnapped is a vampire who starts hunting them down one by one. But this movie, Abigail, was a bloody good time and damn near perfection for me. Now, I assume if you are watching this, you have seen the trailer, so you could tell it's not really a scary movie, but it does borrow and use a lot of kind of those horror tropes as well as a lot of vampire tropes too, but it's not really scary. It uses scares here and there, but it's mostly a sardonic sort of dark comedy. But I also really dig this sort of old spooky mansion that the majority of the film takes place in. It really gives me some old school Resident Evil Spencer Estate vibes.
What is this? Wow, what a mansion!
But yeah, being a gamer, it definitely gives me like that old school Resident Evil vibe. And in true Ready or Not fashion, there is a shit ton of blood. Like Evil Dead on crack levels of blood here. I think the filmmakers have a real fetish for exploding people.
What is it?
Blood. Hope this is not Chris's blood.
And one of the other things I liked about this is that it kind of felt like Predator to me. Now, what I mean by that is if you were to walk into this blind, the movie starts off feeling like a completely different movie. It feels kind of like a kidnapping heist flick. And then about halfway through, the tone changes and it becomes a completely different movie. I like the way they played around with a lot of the vampire tropes and lore. Now, in the movie, when it's revealed that Abigail is indeed a vampire, they all kind of talk amongst themselves about how to kill this vampire. And they mention, stake through the heart, crucifixes, garlic, stuff like that. And I like that they played with it a little bit, that not all of that works. Now, a stake to the heart does work, but the crucifixes and the garlic, they don't do shit to Abigail in this movie. And I also really like the use of the Black Swan song in here that, for many of you that may not know, that was the opening song of the very first Universal Monster movie, Dracula, which is a little bit of foreshadowing for later, so we'll get to that when we get to it. And I also really like the ensemble, the cast that they have. Not only, the villains of this story, but also the group of misfits, these people that kidnapped Abigail. I think all the actors are phenomenal. They all have great chemistry with one another. They all have their own little interesting quirks that sets them apart, but doesn't really have anyone overshadow the other. And they're bantering back and forth. Like, the dialogue of this movie is on point. It's very witty. There's no real wasted dialogue. It just gets to the point. Yeah, I just love it. To say no one really overshadows the other is a little bit of a lie, because if there is one person that does steal the show in this movie, it is the little girl who plays Abigail, because she is phenomenal. And I didn't even know that she was only 13, I guess, when they filmed this. And she has such a mature, attitude and presence about her. And every time she's on the screen, she's great. And especially when she goes into, full-on vampire mode, she really commands your attention in every scene. There's not enough superlatives I can use to comment about her acting ability. I think she's terrific. And I think she has a bright future ahead of her. Now, for a couple of my negatives in regards to this movie, because it wasn't perfect, and one of the negatives wasn't even about the movie itself. It's in regards to the trailer. Now, most of the times, trailers these days will give away shit. And for the most part, aside from, the reveal of Abigail being a vampire, this trailer really doesn't reveal too much. But for any of you that have a keen eye, there's a couple things in there that it does spoil it for this movie. One of which is the guy, I can't remember his name in the movie, he's played by Dan Stevens. He becomes a vampire towards the end. And the other one is the blonde girl, again, I can't remember her name, but she also becomes a vampire. And that's the one where in the trailer, if you have a keen eye or a pause button, you can see her kind of dancing similarly to the way Abigail does. So those two little things were spoiled, but it's not really that big of a deal.
What do we know about vampires?
One of my other negatives is that I feel like the vampire powers get a little muddy because, all right, so traditionally you have to drink the vampire blood in order to become a vampire yourself. Well, it's not usually the case in all vampire movies. Sometimes all it takes is a bite to turn. But in here, they kind of do both, and I'm not really sure what constitutes making one a vampire in this movie. I don't know if it is both, because when the blonde girl gets bit, Abigail, I guess, uses some kind of like mind control on her and turns her. And, you know, when she turns, she starts like raging out, vampire raging out. So was there some sort of just mind control? Is she like a lesser vampire? Because when the Dan Stevens guy turns at the end, he drinks another vampire's blood in order to turn. So I don't know if one just constitutes that you are a vampire, but you're under some sort of mind control, and the other one makes you kind of autonomous to where there is no mind control going on with you. So they probably mentioned it in the movie, and maybe I just kind of glossed over it, but I was a little confused there.
What the fuck is that thing?
Now, all of this really transpires at the end, which I do feel is the weakest part of this movie. Like, not that it's bad, but 2/3 of this movie was phenomenal. The last third, it was good, it just wasn't great, and it wasn't as good as the first, 2/3 of this movie. And a lot of that is because they tried to cram in and overcook the plot here at the end with additional plot to where Lambert, who is played by Giancarlo Esposito, brought all these people here in order to kill Abigail. Now, Lambert himself is a vampire, and he's the one that I mentioned, turned Dan Stevens. And his whole plan, like I said, is to kill Abigail and then eventually kill her father, who we find out is named Lazar, and he will take over Lazar's, empire with whoever helps him kill Abigail. So he turns Dan Stevens into a vampire in order to accomplish that, and that Dan Stevens character ends up betraying Lambert because he felt betrayed and set up by him, so he kills Lambert. And then he starts to go after Abigail to try to kill her because he wants it all for himself. Abigail becomes good and helps out the main girl who goes by Joey, and she ends up helping her. There's just a lot going on at the end of this movie, and I felt like if they would have, stretched this out over the course of the runtime and not tried to just throw all this in at the very end, I think it would have been a little better, at least for me.
I fucking hate ballet.
But then at the very end, when it looks like it's all over, we get the reveal of Lazar. And when he appeared, I thought for a split second that they did some sort of CGI deepfake of Bela Lugosi on the actor's face. But it wasn't, thank God. But the main chick calls him Lazar, and he makes a comment that he's gone by different names over the years. So it's obvious that this is the one and only Dracula, and it kind of got me thinking, like, wow, this is sort of like a new age Dracula's daughter, in quote unquote name only. But yeah, I enjoyed the hell out of this movie. But alright, if you're looking for my recommendation on Abigail, I say run to go see this movie. It is awesome. Like I said, the ending is a little muddy, but it's still a fun ride. There's a lot of funny parts in this. There's a lot of gore. There's enough there to satisfy everybody, and I think y'all will enjoy it. But anyways, that was my look into Abigail. If you have seen it, what are your thoughts? Please post your comments below. As always, like, comment, and subscribe. Adios, now GTFO.